Elena Cobbs should have seen it coming. 23 years as a federal marshal, hundreds of high-risk arrests, and she'd never walked into a setup this clean. The anonymous tip about Marcus the Wolf Hendricks hiding out in the abandoned Riverside Electronics warehouse had seemed legitimate. Dispatch had confirmed the source, background checks had verified the location's connection to known associates, and surveillance photos showed a man matching Hendricks' description entering the building 3 hours ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But as Elena stepped through the warehouse's main entrance, weapon drawn and backup allegedly 5 minutes behind her, she realized with crystal clarity that she'd been played. The first sign was the silence, not the natural quiet of an empty building, but the deliberate, waiting silence of predators lying in ambush. The second sign was the smell, fresh cigarette smoke and gun oil, scents that spoke of recent human presence and prepared violence. The third sign was the subtle creak of floorboards above her, too rhythmic to be settling wood, too purposeful to be coincidence. Elena had survived 2 decades in federal law enforcement by trusting her instincts, and right now every survival alarm in her body was screaming. She keyed her radio with her left hand while maintaining her weapon sight picture with her right. "Control, this is Marshal Cobbs, requesting immediate backup at the Riverside location. Something's not—" The radio crackled with static, then died completely. Signal jamming, professional grade. Marshal Elena Cobbs. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, amplified by speakers hidden throughout the warehouse. Badge number 2847, age 44, divorced, 1 daughter, Sarah, currently attending Georgetown Law School. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena's blood turned to ice. This wasn't about Marcus Hendricks. This was about her. "You can lower your weapon, Marshal. You're surrounded by 6 armed individuals, all with clear sightlines to your position. Your backup has been delayed. And before you consider any heroic gestures, remember that Sarah walks across campus every evening at approximately 8 p.m., alone." The threat against her daughter hit Elena like a physical blow, but she forced herself to remain focused. Panic was death in situations like this. She needed to think, to assess, to find the angles that would let her survive long enough to ensure Sarah's safety. "What do you want?" she called out, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Compliance, Marshal. Nothing more, nothing less. You've been investigating certain financial irregularities within the Marshal's service, irregularities that could prove embarrassing to some very powerful people. We'd like you to stop us." Elena's investigation into the missing witness protection funds had been classified, compartmentalized, known only to herself and Deputy Director Harrison, which meant either Harrison was dirty or the corruption went even deeper than she'd suspected. "And if I refuse? Then your daughter becomes an orphan tonight, and your investigation dies with you. A simple cost-benefit analysis, Marshal. Your life and Sarah's future in exchange for looking the other way on some missing paperwork." Movement caught Elena's eye, shadows shifting in the industrial scaffolding overhead, the subtle glint of rifle scopes catching what little light filtered through the warehouse's grimy windows. They weren't bluffing about being surrounded. "I need proof Sarah is safe," Elena said, buying time while her tactical mind cataloged every detail of her surroundings. Concrete floor, good for mobility, but no cover. Shipping containers stacked 20 feet high on both sides, potential concealment, but also potential traps. Emergency exits at the north and south ends, both probably covered. Distance to the nearest container stack, 43 feet. Too far to reach before 6 rifles could cut her down. "Check your phone, Marshal." Elena's phone buzzed. A picture appeared on the screen. Sarah walking across Georgetown's campus, a red laser dot clearly visible on her chest. The timestamp showed it had been taken 7 minutes ago. The rage that flooded through Elena was pure and white-hot, but she channeled it into focus rather than recklessness. These people had made a fatal mistake. They had threatened her daughter. Elena had faced down armed fugitives, survived 3 assassination attempts, and built a reputation as one of the Marshal Service's most effective operators. But all of that paled compared to what she was capable of when someone threatened Sarah. "I want to see you, all of you, face to face. That's not how this works, Marshal. It is if you want my cooperation." Elena's voice carried the absolute authority of someone who'd spent 2 decades commanding respect in the most dangerous situations imaginable. "You want me to walk away from my investigation? Fine, but I don't negotiate with shadows. Show yourselves, or Sarah can read about her mother's heroic last stand in tomorrow's newspapers." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Elena could hear whispered conversations from multiple positions, above her, behind her, flanking her from both sides. Finally, the voice returned. "Very well, Marshal. But understand, any sudden movements, any attempted heroes, and both you and your daughter die tonight." They emerged from the shadows like wolves leaving their den. 6 figures in tactical gear, all armed with military-grade assault rifles, all moving with the professional precision of experienced killers. Elena recognized the formation immediately. A classic kill box, designed to eliminate any possibility of escape or resistance. The leader removed his mask as he approached, revealing a face Elena knew from federal wanted posters. Vincent Carruthers, former Special Forces, current mercenary, wanted for war crimes in 3 different countries. The kind of man who killed federal marshals for money and slept soundly afterwards. "Marshal Cobbs," Carruthers said, stopping 15 feet away while his team maintained their positions. "I'm impressed. Most people would be begging for their lives by now." "I'm not most people," Elena replied, her eyes constantly moving, cataloging positions, distances, angles of fire. 6 shooters, all professional, all alert, but they'd made the classic mistake of overconfidence. They assumed that overwhelming firepower guaranteed victory. "No, you're not, which is why we're going to do this very carefully. Remove your service weapon. 2 fingers only. Place it on the ground and kick it away." This was the moment Elena had been anticipating since the conversation began. The moment that they would take away the one thing they assumed made her dangerous. They were about to learn that Elena Cobb's most lethal weapon had never been the Glock on her hip. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "The only mistake would be forcing us to kill you, Marshal. Your weapon, now." Elena looked at each of the 6 men surrounding her. Carruthers directly ahead, 2 shooters flanking her from the east, 2 from the west, 1 positioned on the elevated catwalk above. All experienced killers, all confident in their tactical superiority. They had no idea what was about to happen to them. Elena reached for her weapon with deliberate slowness, her mind already calculating the sequence of movements that would turn her from victim to predator in less than 72 seconds. Elena's service weapon hit the concrete floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the warehouse like a death knell. She kicked it away, as instructed, the Glock spinning across the smooth surface until it came to rest against a shipping container 30 feet away. To the 6 armed men surrounding her, it looked like complete capitulation. They had no idea they'd just released the most dangerous predator in the building. "Good," Carruthers said, his assault rifle never wavering from Elena's center mass. "Now we can discuss your future like civilized people. Your investigation ends tonight, Marshal. You forget about the missing funds, you stop asking questions about certain procurement contracts, and you and your daughter get to see tomorrow." Elena stood perfectly still, her hands visible, her posture non-threatening. But behind her calm exterior, her mind was operating at combat speed, processing tactical data with the precision of a supercomputer. 23 years of federal law enforcement, 8 years of military service before that, and countless hours of hand-to-hand combat training had prepared her for exactly this moment. 6 shooters. Carruthers at 12 o'clock, 12 feet away. Rodriguez and Jackson flanking from 3 and 9 o'clock respectively, 15 and 14 feet out. Chen and Morrison covering the rear exits at 7 and 5 o'clock, 18 and 16 feet away. Williams on the catwalk above, 22 feet up and 30 feet out. The sniper, meant to take her down if she somehow managed to neutralize the ground team. Good, Carruthers said, his assault rifle never wavering from Elena's center mass. Now we can discuss your future like civilized people. Your investigation ends tonight, Marshal. You forget about the missing funds, you stop asking questions about certain procurement contracts, and you and your daughter get to see tomorrow. Elena stood perfectly still, her hands visible, her posture non-threatening. But behind her calm exterior, her mind was operating at combat speed, processing tactical data with the precision of a supercomputer. 23 years of federal law enforcement, 8 years of military service before that, and countless hours of hand-to-hand combat training had prepared her for exactly this moment. 6 shooters. Carruthers at 12 o'clock, 12 feet away. Rodriguez and Jackson flanking from 3 and 9 o'clock respectively, 15 and 14 feet out. Chen and Morrison covering the rear exits at 7 and 5 o'clock, 18 and 16 feet away. Williams on the catwalk above, 22 feet up and 30 feet out. The sniper, meant to take her down if she somehow managed to neutralize the ground team. I need guarantees about my daughter, Elena said, her voice calm and reasonable. What she was actually doing was timing their breathing patterns, noting which ones had their fingers on the triggers versus the trigger guards, identifying who would be fastest to react when the situation changed. "You're in no position to make demands, Marshal," Carruthers replied, but Elena noticed that Rodriguez shifted his weight slightly, a tell that he was getting impatient. Jackson's rifle had dropped maybe an inch, still lethal, but not perfectly aligned. Small gaps in their formation, tiny windows of opportunity that most people would never notice. Elena Cobbs wasn't most people. "One more question," she said, taking a half step forward. To the untrained eye, it looked like a natural movement, a slight shift in posture. In reality, it was the first move in a sequence she'd practiced thousands of times in training scenarios, adjusted now for real-world variables and lethal stakes. "What?" Carruthers asked, his finger tightening slightly on his trigger. "Did you really think taking away my gun would make me helpless?" The question hung in the air for maybe half a second before Carruthers realized it wasn't a plea, it was a threat. His eyes widened slightly as Elena's body language shifted from submissive to predator, and he began to squeeze the trigger. Too late. Second one, Elena exploded into motion, diving low and to her right while Carruthers' first shot passed through the space where her head had been a millisecond earlier. Her roll brought her inside Rodriguez's firing arc faster than he could adjust his aim. Second two, Elena's shoulder slammed into Rodriguez's legs at knee level, a textbook takedown that sent him crashing backward into a stack of metal shipping containers. The impact drove the air from his lungs and sent his rifle clattering across the floor. Second 3 to 4, Elena was already moving again, using Rodriguez's falling body as a springboard to launch herself toward Jackson. His rifle was swinging toward her when her boot connected with his wrist, the crack of breaking bone audible even over the echoing gunshots. Second 5 to 6, Jackson's rifle went flying and Elena used her momentum to grab his tactical vest and swing him around like a human shield as just Chen opened fire from behind her. 3 rounds meant for Elena's back instead punched through Jackson's body armor.
Seconds 7 to 8. Elena released the dying Jackson and rolled behind a shipping container as Morrison's shot sparked off metal inches from her head. She needed to break up their formation, force them to move, create chaos in their ordered tactical approach. Second 9 to 10. The container she was hiding behind was on wheels. Elena put her shoulder against it and shoved hard, sending it rolling toward Morrison, while she moved in the opposite direction toward Chen. Seconds 11 to 12. Morrison dove sideways to avoid the container, his shots going wild. Chen had a clear shot at Elena, but he hesitated for a fraction of a second, probably afraid of hitting Carruthers, who was repositioning for a better angle. Seconds 13 to 14. Elena didn't hesitate. She closed the distance to Chen in 2 quick steps and grabbed the barrel of his rifle, pushing it skyward just as he fired. The muzzle flash burned her hand, but the bullets punched harmlessly into the warehouse ceiling. Seconds 15 to 16. Elena drove her knee up into Chen's solar plexus, doubling him over, then brought her elbow down on the back of his neck. He dropped like a stone, his rifle falling beside him. Seconds 17 to 18. Carruthers had repositioned and had a clear shot, but Elena was already moving again, grabbing Chen's rifle and using it like a club to parry Morrison's attempt to get his weapon back online. Seconds 19 to 20. The rifle stock connected with Morrison's jaw, spinning him around. Elena followed up with a palm strike to the back of his skull that sent him face first into the concrete floor. Seconds 21 to 22. Williams, the sniper on the catwalk, finally had a clear shot and took it. Elena heard the crack of the rifle and felt the bullet tear through the shoulder of her tactical vest. Close, but not lethal. Seconds 24 to 25. Elena grabbed Morrison's sidearm from his holster and put 3 quick rounds into the catwalk's support structure directly beneath Williams. The metallic pings of bullets hitting steel were followed by the groan of overstressed metal. Seconds 26 to 27. The catwalk section collapsed, sending Williams plummeting 20 feet to the warehouse floor. He landed hard, but was still moving, reaching for his backup weapon. Seconds 28 to 29. Elena put 2 rounds center mass into Williams before he could clear leather. Professional compassion, quick and clean, rather than letting him suffer. Seconds 30 to 31. That left Carruthers, who had used the chaos to reposition behind a concrete pillar. Elena could see the muzzle of his rifle protruding from behind cover, tracking her movement. Seconds 32 to 33. Elena sprinted toward the pillar, zigzagging to make herself a difficult target. Carruthers' shots chipped concrete behind her as she closed the distance. Seconds 34 to 35. Instead of trying to go around the pillar, Elena went up it, using a running jump to grab an overhead pipe and swing herself up and over Carruthers' position. Seconds 36 to 37. She dropped down behind him like a spider, landing silently on the balls of her feet. Carruthers spun around, but Elena was already inside his rifle's effective range. Elena grabbed the rifle's barrel and pushed it aside while driving her other elbow into Carruthers' throat. He gagged and stumbled backward, trying to create distance. Seconds 39 to 40. Elena didn't let him recover. She swept his legs, sending him crashing to the ground, then stopped down hard on his rifle hand. The crack of breaking bones was audible throughout the warehouse. Seconds 41 to 42. Carruthers tried to roll away and reach for his sidearm, but Elena was faster. She grabbed his tactical vest and hauled him upright, then drove her knee into his midsection. Seconds 43 to 44. As Carruthers doubled over, Elena grabbed the back of his head and drove it down into her rising knee. The impact was devastating. Lights out. Game over. Elena stood in the sudden silence of the warehouse, surrounded by 6 incapacitated attackers, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Rodriguez was unconscious against the shipping containers. Jackson was dead from Chen's friendly fire. Chen was down and not moving. Morrison had a concussion and wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. Williams was permanently out of the equation, and Carruthers was unconscious with a severely broken nose and probable concussion. 72 seconds, from disarmed victim to total victory in just over a minute. Elena retrieved her service weapon and immediately.
The warehouse looked like a war zone by the time the tactical teams arrived. Elena sat calmly on a shipping container, her service weapon holstered, applying pressure to the bullet graze on her shoulder while she waited for the cavalry. Around her, the evidence of the 72-second engagement painted a stark picture of professional violence efficiently applied. Deputy Director James Harrison was the first through the door, his normally pristine suit rumpled and his face pale with what Elena hoped was genuine concern rather than fear of exposure. Behind him came a parade of federal agents, paramedics, and crime scene technicians who immediately began the complex process of documenting what would undoubtedly become a legendary case study in tactical response. "Jesus Christ, Elena," Harrison breathed, taking in the scene. "What happened here?" "Someone wanted my investigation to go away," Elena replied, not moving from her perch. "They thought threatening Sarah would be enough leverage to make me back down. They were wrong." Harrison's eyes flickered, just for a moment, but Elena caught it. The same expression she'd seen on suspects' faces when they realized they'd been caught. Her suspicions about corruption within the Marshal Service had just been confirmed. 6 armed suspects, Elena continued, conversationally, watching Harrison's face. Professional military contractors, by the look of their gear. Someone paid a lot of money to make this problem disappear. The kind of money that suggests my investigation was hitting very close to home. "We'll get to the bottom of this," Harrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The important thing is that you're safe." "Safe for now," Elena agreed, "but whoever hired these men isn't going to give up just because their first attempt failed. They'll regroup, reassess, try again. Unless, of course, we remove their motivation entirely." A paramedic approached to examine Elena's shoulder wound, but she waved him away. The bullet had barely grazed her, painful but not incapacitating. She'd had worse injuries during training exercises. "Ma'am, you should really let me—" "I'm fine," Elena said firmly. "Check on the suspects. Some of them might still be breathing." Agent Rodriguez, not to be confused with the mercenary of the same name, currently unconscious against a shipping container, emerged from behind a stack of crates with an evidence bag. "Marshal Cobbs, we found communication equipment, military-grade radio jammers, encrypted phones, surveillance gear. This was a sophisticated operation." "Any identification on the suspects?" "Vincent Carruthers, former Special Forces turned mercenary. The others match profiles from various private military companies, all with records of working for high-paying, morally flexible clients." Elena nodded, unsurprised. The level of coordination and equipment had suggested serious funding from the beginning. What interested her more was Harrison's reaction to the names, another flicker of recognition, quickly suppressed. "Director Harrison," Elena said, hopping down from the shipping container, "I think we need to discuss the security of my investigation files. Someone with access to classified information set this up." "Of course," Harrison replied, too quickly. "We'll conduct a full internal review, implement new security protocols. That won't be necessary, because I'm about to solve this case in a very public, very permanent way." The warehouse fell silent, except for the quiet conversations of crime scene technicians and the occasional groan from one of the surviving mercenaries. Elena walked slowly toward Harrison, her movements casual but purposeful. "You know what the beautiful thing about being threatened is?" Elena asked conversationally. "It clarifies your priorities wonderfully. 3 hours ago, I was concerned about following proper procedures, maintaining chain of custody, building an airtight case for federal prosecutors. Now I just want to make sure the people who threatened my daughter never get the chance to do it again." "Elena, you're in shock. You should—" I'm perfectly clear-headed, James, clear enough to realize that the only way these mercenaries could have known about my investigation is if someone inside the Marshal Service told them, someone with access to classified files and operational details. Harrison took a step backward, his hand moving unconsciously toward his sidearm. Elena noticed the gesture and smiled, not a pleasant expression. The missing funds weren't just embezzlement, they were payment for services rendered, protection for certain criminal enterprises, advance warning of federal raids, maybe even the occasional elimination of troublesome witnesses. A nice little side business that's been running for years under the noses of honest agents. "You can't prove any of that," Harrison said, but sweat was beading on his forehead despite the warehouse's chill. "Actually, I can, because while you were setting up your mercenaries to kill me, I was documenting everything. Financial records, communication logs, meeting schedules, all safely stored in multiple locations with instructions for release if anything happens to me or my family." Elena pulled out her phone and showed Harrison the screen. A timer was counting down. 23:47, 23:46, 23:45. 24 hours, Elena said. "That's how long you have to turn yourself in, confess to your crimes, and provide testimony against your co-conspirators. If you don't, every piece of evidence gets released simultaneously to the FBI, the Department of Justice, the Senate Judiciary Committee, and 3 different newspapers." "You're bluffing," Harrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? 6 professional killers just found out what happens when people underestimate Elena Cobbs. Do you really want to test me again?" Harrison looked around the warehouse, at the unconscious and dead mercenaries, at the evidence of Elena's devastatingly efficient response to their threat, and at the federal agents who were starting to look at him with suspicion rather than respect. "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. This goes deeper than you know. People with connections, influence, the power to destroy careers and lives. Then you'd better hope they decide I'm more dangerous as an enemy than an ally. 24 hours, James. After that, everyone goes down together." She turned to Agent Rodriguez. "I want a protective detail on my daughter, effective immediately, and I want this warehouse sealed as a crime scene until every piece of evidence has been catalogued and analyzed." "Yes, ma'am." Elena walked toward the warehouse exit, then paused and looked back at Harrison. "Oh, and James, if anything happens to me or my family, if I slip in the shower, get hit by a bus, or choke on a chicken bone, all that evidence gets released automatically. I've taken the decision out of human hands entirely." As Elena stepped out into the cool night air, she could hear Harrison's panicked voice behind her, already making phone calls to damage control specialists and criminal defense attorneys. The corrupt network he'd been a part of was about to discover that threatening Elena Cobbs's daughter was the last mistake they would ever make. 24 hours. Elena checked her watch and smiled. More than enough time to ensure that justice was served, with or without the cooperation of the people who were supposed to be on the side of the law. Some battles were won with overwhelming force, others were won with superior strategy and ruthless execution. Elena Cobbs was exceptionally good at both.
Elena didn't go home that night. Instead, she drove to a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Baltimore, ordered black coffee and apple pie, and began making a series of phone calls that would either save her career or end it permanently. The countdown timer on her phone showed 22:15 remaining, and she had no intention of wasting a single second. Her first call was to Senator Patricia Kellerman, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the one politician in Washington who'd built her career on going after corrupt federal agencies. It was 2:47 a.m., but Kellerman answered on the second ring, the mark of someone who understood that important calls rarely came at convenient hours. "Marshal Cobbs," Kellerman's voice was alert despite the hour. "I was wondering when you'd call. News travels fast in certain circles, and word is you've had an eventful evening. Senator, I need to brief you on a situation that affects the integrity of the U.S. Marshal Service. How secure is this line?" "Secure enough. Are you somewhere you can talk freely?" Elena glanced around the diner. 2 truckers at the counter, a waitress reading a paperback novel, a cook visible through the kitchen window. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that the conversation happening in Booth 7 could reshape federal law enforcement. "Secure enough," Elena replied. "Senator, tonight 6 armed mercenaries attempted to kill me in order to stop an investigation into missing witness protection funds. The threat came from inside the Marshal Service, specifically from Deputy Director James Harrison." Silence on the other end of the line. When Kellerman spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. "That's a serious accusation, Marshal. It's a provable accusation. I have financial records showing systematic diversion of federal funds, communication logs proving coordination between Harrison and known criminal elements, and as of tonight, 6 witnesses in federal custody who can testify about the contract on my life." "How many of those witnesses are still breathing?" Elena smiled grimly. "Enough to make the case stick. Senator, I'm going to need congressional protection for this investigation. Harrison has 24 hours to surrender himself, but his associates won't go quietly. What do you need from me?" "Official oversight. Make this investigation a matter of congressional record so it can't be buried or classified. These people have been operating in shadow for years. Time to drag them into the light." "Done. I'll convene an emergency session of the committee for tomorrow afternoon. Can you testify?" "I'll be there." Elena's second call was to FBI Deputy Director Marcus Webb, an old friend from her military days who'd risen through the bureau ranks on a reputation for absolute integrity. Like Kellerman, Webb answered immediately. "Elena, I heard about the warehouse. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Marcus, but I need a favor, a big one." "Name it." "I need the FBI to take protective custody of my daughter and provide security for a congressional hearing tomorrow. There's a corruption network inside the Marshal Service that's about to implode, and they'll try to eliminate witnesses before the evidence comes out." "Jesus, how deep does this go?" "Deep enough that 6 military contractors thought they could make it disappear by killing a federal marshal. These people have serious resources and no moral boundaries." "Your daughter will be safe, Elena. I'll handle it personally." Elena's third call was to investigative journalist Sarah Chen of The Washington Post, whose exposés on government corruption had earned her a Pulitzer Prize and the hatred of half of Washington's power structure. "Miss Chen, this is Marshal Elena Cobbs. I have a story for you." "I know who you are, Marshal, and I've been expecting your call ever since word leaked about tonight's excitement. What kind of story are we talking about?" "The kind that wins Pulitzer Prizes and ends careers. Systematic corruption within federal law enforcement involving embezzlement, criminal conspiracy, and attempted murder of federal agents. I'll need evidence." "You'll have it. Tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m., Hart Senate Office Building. Bring cameras." Elena's fourth and final call was the most important one. Sarah's phone rang 4 times before her daughter's sleepy voice answered. "Mom, it's almost 3 in the morning. Is everything—" "Baby, listen to me carefully. FBI agents are going to come to your apartment within the next hour. They're going to take you somewhere safe until this situation is resolved." "What situation? Mom, you're scaring me." Elena's voice softened. "Some very bad people tried to hurt me tonight because of a case I'm working on. They made threats about you, which means you're not safe until I finish what I started." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. More than fine, actually. The bad guys found out the hard way that threatening Elena Cobbs's daughter is about the dumbest thing they could possibly do." Despite everything, Sarah laughed. "How many of them?" 6. "And?" 6 down, 0 to go. but there are more behind them, which is why you need federal protection until I can clean house properly." "How long?" Elena checked her countdown timer. 21:43 remaining. 24 hours, maybe less. Just long enough for me to remind certain people why threatening federal marshals and their families is such a bad idea. After hanging up, Elena sat in the diner booth and methodically reviewed her tactical situation. Harrison and his associates would spend the next few hours in crisis mode, calling lawyers, destroying evidence, maybe even arranging for additional mercenaries. They'd assume she was bluffing about the automated evidence release, right up until the moment it became clear she wasn't. The countdown timer was both protection and weapon. As long as it was ticking, Elena was more valuable alive than dead. Killing her would only trigger the evidence dump they were desperately trying to prevent. But once the 24 hours expired, that protection would disappear. She needed to use every minute effectively. Elena paid her check and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. Time to go hunting. Her first stop was Harrison's house in Georgetown, not to confront him, but to document who was coming and going. Elena parked across the street with a clear view of the front door and settled in to watch. Within an hour, she had photographed 12 different visitors, including 2 she recognized as executives from private military contractors and one who looked suspiciously like a federal judge. Her second stop was the office of Blackstone Security Solutions, the private military company that employed most of the mercenaries from the warehouse. Elena didn't approach the building. Instead, she photographed everyone entering and leaving, building a database of faces and license plates that could be cross-referenced later. By sunrise, Elena had visited 6 different locations connected to Harrison's network, documenting meetings, recording license plates, and building a comprehensive picture of the criminal conspiracy that had tried to have her killed. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop now and live. Continue and join your friends in the warehouse." Elena typed back, "Come find me. I'll be happy to demonstrate what happened to my friends in the warehouse." No response. Elena drove to a secure location, an FBI safe house that Marcus Webb had arranged, and began the final phase of her preparation. In 18 hours, she would walk into the Hart Senate office building and testify before a congressional committee. Everything that happened between now and then would determine whether justice was served or whether Elena Cobbs became another casualty in the war between law and corruption. She checked her countdown timer, 18:27 remaining. Time to finish what she'd started.
Elena's safe house was a nondescript suburban apartment that looked like it belonged to a middle-management accountant. Beige walls, generic furniture, and absolutely no personality. What it lacked in style, it made up for in security. Bulletproof windows, reinforced doors, and a direct line to FBI tactical support that could have a response team on site in under 4 minutes. Elena didn't plan to be there long enough to need backup. She spread her evidence across the dining room table like a general planning a military campaign. Financial records showing the flow of missing funds, communication intercepts proving coordination between Harrison and criminal elements, photographs from her morning surveillance runs, and detailed dossiers on every member of the corruption network she'd identified. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity. Harrison and his associates had been skimming funds from witness protection budgets for years, using the money to finance a private intelligence network that sold federal information to the highest bidders. Drug cartels got advance warning of raids. Organized crime families learned which witnesses were cooperating with federal prosecutors. Foreign agents purchased classified operational details. It was treason dressed up as entrepreneurship, and it had been going on for at least 5 years. Elena's secure phone rang. Marcus Webb's voice was tense. "Elena, we've got a problem. Harrison didn't come home last night, and his official vehicle was found abandoned at Reagan Airport. We think he's running." "He's not running," Elena replied, studying a photograph from her surveillance. "He's regrouping. Harrison knows that disappearing now would only confirm his guilt. He'll surface for the hearing this afternoon, probably with a team of lawyers and a story about rogue agents exceeding their authority. Are you sure about that? I'm sure he's not stupid enough to run, but I'm also sure he's desperate enough to try eliminating the evidence before it can be presented. As if summoned by her words, Elena's motion sensors detected movement in the parking lot outside. She moved to the window and peered through the bulletproof glass. 6 vehicles had just pulled into the complex, 3 black SUVs and 3 unmarked sedans, all with the kind of tinted windows that screamed federal law enforcement or private military. "Marcus, I need that backup now," Elena said into her phone. "ETA 3 minutes. Can you hold that long?" Elena watched as armed figures emerged from the vehicles. 12 men in tactical gear, moving with professional precision toward her building. These weren't the same mercenaries from the warehouse. This was a fresh team, probably better trained and definitely better prepared. "We're about to find out," Elena replied. She hit the apartment's emergency lockdown system, activating steel shutters over the windows and electromagnetic locks on all doors. The safe house was designed to withstand a sustained assault for up to 30 minutes, more than enough time for federal backup to arrive, unless the attackers had inside information about the building's defenses. The first explosive charge detonated against the front door exactly 60 seconds later, followed immediately by similar blasts at the rear exit and what Elena had thought was a sealed service entrance. They weren't trying to breach the defenses, they were bypassing them entirely, with intelligence that could only have come from federal sources. Elena grabbed her tactical gear and moved to the apartment's central hallway, the most defensible position available. Her service weapon felt reassuring in her hand, but she knew that 12 professional operators with automatic weapons and explosive devices would make this a very different fight than the warehouse encounter. "This is Elena Cobbs, federal marshal, armed and prepared to defend this position. You have 30 seconds to identify yourselves before I start shooting." The response came in the form of automatic weapons fire that chewed through the apartment's interior walls like they were made of paper. Elena dove behind an overturned table as bullets whined overhead, realizing that the safe house's defenses were designed to keep people out, not to protect someone already inside from a coordinated assault. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Surrender now and your death will be quick. Fight and we'll make it last hours." She typed back, "Come and try. I'm getting bored waiting for you." The tactical situation was grim, but not hopeless. 12 attackers meant that they'd have to funnel through the apartment's narrow doorways, limiting their numerical advantage. The building's layout forced them to approach from predictable angles, giving Elena defensive advantages despite being outnumbered. More importantly, they'd made the same mistake as the warehouse team. They assumed that overwhelming firepower guaranteed victory against Elena Cobbs. The first breach team came through the front door, fast and professional. 3 men with assault rifles and body armor. Elena had positioned herself behind a reinforced kitchen island with clear lines of fire to all 3 entrance points. Her first shot took out the point man before he'd fully cleared the doorway. Her second dropped the number 2 man as he tried to step over his partner's body. The third man made it 3 steps into the apartment before Elena's third shot caught him center mass. "Team 1 is down," came a voice from outside. "Switch to gas." Tear gas canisters crashed through the windows, filling the apartment with choking white smoke. Elena had anticipated this. The building's ventilation system included emergency air scrubbers that she'd activated during lockdown. She could breathe. Their attackers assumed she couldn't. The second breach team came through the rear entrance while Elena was supposedly incapacitated by gas. She heard their footsteps and equipment rattling as they moved through the smoke, trying to locate her position. Elena had moved to a bathroom with a clear view of the hallway, her service weapon aimed at the doorway where the attackers would appear. When the first figure emerged from the smoke, she put 2 rounds center mass before shifting to the second target. 4 down, 8 to go. "This is taking too long," someone shouted from outside. "Bring up the heavy charges." Elena's phone showed 2:47 until FBI backup arrived. She needed to delay the assault, force them to come to her one at a time rather than allowing them to use explosives to bring down the entire building. She keyed her radio to the emergency frequency. "This is Federal Marshal Elena Cobbs under assault at the Georgetown Safe House. 12 hostile operators with military-grade weapons and explosives. I am holding position but need immediate tactical support." "Marshal Cobbs, this is FBI Tactical. We're inbound. ETA 2 minutes. Can you hold that long?" "I can hold," Elena replied, then added, "Tell Marcus Webb that Harrison's network is trying to tie up loose ends. This proves everything." The third breach team tried a different approach. They came through the ceiling. Elena heard the cutting tools working on the roof above her, followed by the sound of someone dropping into the apartment's upper level. She moved carefully through the smoke-filled hallway, using the building's layout to stay out of sight lines while tracking the intruder's movement by sound. 2 sets of footsteps, moving cautiously toward her last known position. Elena positioned herself at the base of the stairs and waited. When the first attacker appeared at the landing, she took him out with a single shot to the head. The second man tried to retreat back upstairs, but Elena was already moving, taking the steps 2 at a time. She caught him halfway up and put 2 rounds in his back before he could raise his weapon. 6 down, 6 to go. The remaining attackers seemed to realize that their superior numbers weren't translating into tactical advantage. Elena could hear heated discussions outside. Someone was calling for withdrawal, while another voice insisted on completing the mission. 2 more minutes and federal backup arrives. You've already lost half your team. How many more body bags do you want to fill?" The answer came in the form of a massive explosion that blew out the apartment's front wall. The remaining 6 attackers stormed through the breach together, abandoning tactical discipline in favor of overwhelming firepower. Elena was ready for them. She'd positioned herself behind the apartment's main support beam, using the structural steel as cover, while maintaining firing positions to both flanks. As the attackers poured through the breach, she began to pick them off with methodical precision. Shot, shift position, shot, shift again. Elena moved through the smoke and debris like a ghost, always 1 step ahead of their muzzle flashes, always firing from unexpected angles. The 7th man went down as he tried to flank her position. The 8th fell when he stopped to check on his partner. The 9th made it almost to Elena's position before Elena put a bullet through his visor. 3 left, and Elena could hear sirens in the distance. The remaining attackers seemed to realize that their mission had become a suicide run. One of them shouted, "Abort! Federal backup incoming!" But Elena wasn't finished with them yet. She emerged from cover as they tried to retreat, her weapon tracking smoothly from target to target. The 10th man made it halfway to the breach before Elena's bullet caught him in the spine. The 11th got 3 steps further before going down with a round through his lung. The 12th and final attacker made it to the blown-out wall before Elena's last shot dropped him on the threshold between the apartment and freedom. 12 attackers. 12 down. 0 escaped. Elena hosted her weapon as FBI tactical teams swarmed into the building. The safe house looked like a war zone, but she was uninjured and very much alive. Marcus Webb was the first FBI agent through the door, his eyes wide as he took in the carnage. "Elena, are you—" "I'm fine," she replied.
The Hart Senate office building buzzed with unusual energy as Elena walked through its marble corridors. Word had leaked about the morning's assault on the FBI safe house, and Capitol Hill was alive with rumors about corruption scandals, dead mercenaries, and a federal marshal who'd apparently declared war on her own agency. Senator Kellerman met Elena at the committee room entrance, her expression grim. "Marshal, I've been briefed on this morning's events. Are you sure you're up for this testimony?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything," Elena replied, adjusting the tactical vest she wore beneath her dress uniform. Even in the most secure building in Washington, she wasn't taking chances. "How many people know the specific details of my testimony?" "Just the committee members and essential staff." "Why?"
Elena nodded toward the gallery, where she'd spotted at least 3 faces from her surveillance photographs. Because Harrison's associates are here, and they're not planning to let me finish my testimony. The committee room was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from major news outlets filled the press gallery, while the public seating overflowed with federal agents, congressional staff, and what Elena suspected were more of Harrison's people. She counted at least 6 individuals whose positioning and behavior suggested they were armed, despite the building's security measures. Deputy Director Harrison sat at the witness table, flanked by 3 high-powered defense attorneys, and projecting the confident demeanor of a man who believed he still controlled the situation. He nodded politely to Elena as she took her seat at the opposing table, as if they were colleagues appearing before a routine administrative review. "Ladies and gentlemen," Senator Kellerman called the hearing to order. "We're here today to investigate serious allegations of corruption within the United States Marshal Service. Marshal Elena Cobbs, you've requested to testify first." Elena stood and walked to the witness stand, her dress uniform crisp despite the morning's combat engagement. As she raised her right hand to be sworn in, she noticed subtle movements in the gallery. Harrison's associates shifting positions, hands moving closer to concealed weapons. "Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Elena sat and looked directly at the television cameras broadcasting the hearing live. Her countdown timer showed 07:43 remaining, but she no longer needed it. The truth was about to become public record, protected by congressional immunity and broadcast to millions of viewers. "Senator Kellerman, members of the committee, we're here today to investigate serious allegations of corruption within the United States Marshal Service. Marshal Elena Cobbs, you've requested to testify first." Elena stent and walked to the witness stand, her dress uniform crisp despite the morning's combat engagement. As she raised her right hand to be sworn in, she noticed subtle movements in the gallery, Harrison's associates shifting positions, hands moving closer to concealed weapons. "Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Elena sat and looked directly at the television cameras broadcasting the hearing live. Her countdown timer showed 07:43 remaining, but she no longer needed it. The truth was about to become public record, protected by congressional immunity and broadcast to millions of viewers. "Senator Kellerman, members of the committee, for the past 8 months, I've been investigating systematic theft of federal funds allocated to the Witness Security Program. What I discovered was far worse than simple embezzlement." She activated the presentation screen behind her, displaying the first of dozens of financial documents. These records show approximately $12 million diverted from witness protection over a 5-year period. The money was channeled through shell companies and ultimately used to finance a private intelligence network that sold federal law enforcement information to criminal organizations. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Harrison's lawyers immediately began conferring in whispered conversations, but Harrison himself remained stone-faced. The network operated under the direct supervision of Deputy Director James Harrison, Elena continued, displaying communication intercepts on the screen. These encrypted messages show coordination between Harrison and known associates of the Kozlov crime family, the Juarez cartel, and at least 3 other major criminal enterprises. Senator Morrison, the committee's ranking minority member, leaned forward. "Marshal Cobbs, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence of actual harm resulting from this alleged information sharing?" Elena's expression hardened. "Senator, 6 federal witnesses under Marshal Service protection have been murdered in the past 2 years. All 6 deaths occurred within weeks of their cases being assigned to Deputy Director Harrison's oversight. Additionally, at least 12 major federal raids failed to locate their targets due to what was classified as intelligence failures." She clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of the murdered witnesses. Maria Santos, scheduled to testify against the Juarez cartel leadership,
found dead in her Baltimore safe house 3 days before trial. Thomas Chen, key witness in a money laundering case, killed in what appeared to be a random mugging in Seattle. Rebecca Martinez. Objection. One of Harrison's lawyers interrupted, standing despite the congressional setting. This testimony contains unsubstantiated allegations that prejudice my client. This is a congressional hearing, not a courtroom, Senator Kellerman replied sharply. Your client will have his opportunity to respond. Marshal Cobbs, please continue. Elena nodded and activated the next presentation slide. Yesterday evening, Deputy Director Harrison attempted to halt my investigation through intimidation and violence. 6 armed mercenaries, led by Vincent Carruthers, were hired to eliminate me at an abandoned warehouse in Baltimore. The committee room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Harrison's face remained impassive, but Elena noticed sweat beading on his forehead. The mercenaries demanded that I cease my investigation in exchange for my daughter's safety. Elena continued, her voice growing harder. When I refused to be intimidated, they attempted to execute me. All 6 attackers were neutralized. And this morning? Senator Kellerman prompted. This morning, 12 additional mercenaries assaulted the FBI safe house where I was preparing for today's testimony. The attack was coordinated with inside knowledge of federal security protocols and building layouts. All 12 attackers were neutralized, but the message was clear. Deputy Director Harrison's network was willing to kill federal agents and assault secure federal facilities to prevent the truth from coming out. Elena turned to face Harrison directly. Deputy Director, would you like to explain to this committee why 18 mercenaries have died trying to prevent my testimony? Harrison's lead attorney placed a restraining hand on his client's arm, but Harrison shook it off and leaned toward his microphone. Marshal Cobbs has obviously suffered severe psychological trauma from her alleged encounters, her paranoid fantasies about vast conspiracy networks. The bodies are real, Director Harrison. 18 dead mercenaries, all with documented connections to private military companies that received payments from the shell companies I've traced back to you. The forensic accounting alone will be enough to convict you. She activated her final presentation slide, showing bank records that traced the flow of stolen funds through multiple intermediaries before arriving at accounts controlled by Harrison and his associates. But we don't need to rely solely on financial records, because 3 of the surviving mercenaries from this morning's assault have already agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. This was a bluff. All 12 morning attackers were dead, but Elena watched Harrison's face carefully for his reaction. The momentary flash of panic in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. The network is finished, Director Harrison. Your associates are already cutting deals to save themselves. Your mercenaries are dead, and your crimes are now part of the congressional record. The only question remaining is whether you're going to accept responsibility or continue this charade until the bitter end. Harrison stood up abruptly, knocking over his water glass. This is all fabrication. Marshal Cobbs is a rogue agent who's killed innocent contractors and fabricated evidence to support her delusions. He never finished the sentence. Elena had been watching the gallery throughout her testimony, and she'd noticed subtle movements that suggested Harrison's remaining associates were preparing for a desperate final play. As Harrison ranted about fabricated evidence, she saw 3 men rise simultaneously from different sections of the seating area. "Gun!" Elena shouted, diving sideways off the witness stand. The first shot shattered the wood paneling behind where she'd been sitting. The second punched through the committee table. The third sparked off the marble floor as Elena rolled behind a pillar. Chaos erupted in the committee room as senators and staff dove for cover, while Elena's training took over. She drew her service weapon and began returning fire, her shots precise and devastating, despite the pandemonium around her. The first shooter went down with a bullet through his chest before he could fire again. The second managed to get off 3 more rounds before Elena's shot caught him in the head. The third tried to use fleeing civilians as cover, but Elena had a clear shot and took it without hesitation. Within 30 seconds, the shooting was over. 3 more of
The Hart Senate office building buzzed with unusual energy as Elena walked through its marble corridors. Word had leaked about the morning's assault on the FBI safe house, and Capitol Hill was alive with rumors about corruption scandals, dead mercenaries, and a federal marshal who'd apparently declared war on her own agency. Senator Kellerman met Elena at the committee room entrance, her expression grim. "Marshal, I've been briefed on this morning's events. Are you sure you're up for this testimony?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything," Elena replied, adjusting the tactical vest she wore beneath her dress uniform. Even in the most secure building in Washington, she wasn't taking chances. "How many people know the specific details of my testimony?" "Just the committee members and essential staff." "Why?" Elena nodded toward the gallery where she'd spotted at least 3 faces from her surveillance photographs. "Because Harrison's associates are here, and they're not planning to let me finish my testimony." The committee room was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from major news outlets filled the press gallery, while the public seating overflowed with federal agents, congressional staff, and what Elena suspected were more of Harrison's people. She counted at least 6 individuals whose positioning and behavior suggested they were armed, despite the building's security measures. Deputy Director Harrison sat at the witness table, flanked by 3 high-powered defense attorneys, and projecting the confident demeanor of a man who believed he still controlled the situation. He nodded politely to Elena as she took her seat at the opposing table, as if they were colleagues appearing before a routine administrative review. "Ladies and gentlemen," Senator Kellerman called the hearing to order, "we're here today to investigate serious allegations of corruption within the United States Marshal Service. Marshal Elena Cobbs, you've requested to testify first." Elena stood and walked to the witness stand, her dress uniform crisp despite the morning's combat engagement. As she raised her right hand to be sworn in, she noticed subtle movements in the gallery. Harrison's people shifting positions, hands moving closer to concealed weapons. "Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Elena sat and looked directly at the television cameras broadcasting the hearing live. Her countdown timer showed 07:43 remaining, but she no longer needed it. The truth was about to become public record, protected by congressional immunity and broadcast to millions of viewers. "Senator Kellerman, members of the committee," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We're here today to investigate serious allegations of corruption within the United States Marshal Service. Marshal Elena Cobbs, you've requested to testify first." The records show approximately $12 million diverted from witness protection over a 5-year period. The money was channeled through shell companies and ultimately used to finance a private intelligence network that sold federal law enforcement information to criminal organizations. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Harrison's lawyers immediately began conferring in whispered conversations, but Harrison himself remained stone-faced. The network operated under the direct supervision of Deputy Director James Harrison, Elena continued, displaying communication intercepts on the screen. These encrypted messages show coordination between Harrison and known associates of the Kozlov crime family, the Juarez cartel, and at least 3 other major criminal enterprises. Senator Morrison, the committee's ranking minority member, leaned forward. "Marshal Cobbs, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence of actual harm resulting from this alleged information sharing?" Elena's expression hardened. "Senator, 6 federal witnesses under Marshal Service protection have been murdered in the past 2 years. All 6 deaths occurred within weeks of their cases being assigned to Deputy Director Harrison's oversight. Additionally, at least 12 major federal raids failed to locate their targets due to what was classified as intelligence failures." She clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of the murdered witnesses. Maria Santos, scheduled to testify against the Juarez cartel leadership, found dead in her Baltimore safe house 3 days before trial.
Thomas Chen, key witness in a money laundering case, killed in what appeared to be a random mugging in Seattle. Rebecca Martinez, objection, one of Harrison's lawyers interrupted, standing despite the congressional setting. This testimony contains unsubstantiated allegations that prejudice my client. This is a congressional hearing, not a courtroom, Senator Kellerman replied sharply. Your client will have his opportunity to respond. Marshal Cobbs, please continue. Elena nodded and activated the next presentation slide. Yesterday evening, Deputy Director Harrison attempted to halt my investigation through intimidation and violence. 6 armed mercenaries, led by Vincent Carruthers, were hired to eliminate me at an abandoned warehouse in Baltimore. The committee room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Harrison's face remained impassive, but Elena noticed sweat beading on his forehead. The mercenaries demanded that I cease my investigation in exchange for my daughter's safety. When I refused to be intimidated, they attempted to execute me. All 6 attackers were neutralized. And this morning, Senator Kellerman prompted. This morning, 12 additional mercenaries assaulted the FBI safe house where I was preparing for today's testimony. The attack was coordinated with inside knowledge of federal security protocols and building layouts. All 12 attackers were neutralized, but the message was clear. Deputy Director Harrison's network was willing to kill federal agents and assault federal secure facilities to prevent the truth from coming out. Elena turned to face Harrison directly. Deputy Director, would you like to explain to this committee why 18 mercenaries have died trying to prevent my testimony? Harrison's lead attorney placed a restraining hand on his client's arm, but Harrison shook it off and leaned toward his microphone. Marshal Cobbs has obviously suffered severe psychological trauma from her alleged encounters, her paranoid fantasies about vast conspiracy networks. The bodies are real, Director Harrison, Elena interrupted. 18 dead mercenaries, all with documented connections to private military companies that received payments from the shell companies I've traced back to you. The forensic accounting alone will be enough to convict you. She activated her final presentation slide, showing bank records that traced the flow of stolen funds through multiple intermediaries before arriving at accounts controlled by Harrison and his associates. But we don't need to rely solely on financial records, Elena continued, because 3 of the surviving mercenaries from this morning's assault have already agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. This was a bluff. All 12 morning attackers were dead, but Elena watched Harrison's face carefully for his reaction. The momentary flash of panic in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. The network is finished, Director Harrison. Your associates are already cutting deals to save themselves, your mercenaries are dead, and your crimes are now part of the congressional record. The only question remaining is whether you're going to accept responsibility or continue this charade until the bitter end. Harrison stood up, knocking over his water glass. This is all fabrication. Marshal Cobbs is a rogue agent who's killed innocent contractors and fabricated evidence to support her delusions. He never finished the sentence. Elena had been watching the gallery throughout her testimony, and she'd noticed subtle movements that suggested Harrison's remaining associates were preparing for a desperate final play. As Harrison ranted about fabricated evidence, she saw 3 men rise simultaneously from different sections of the seating area. "Gun!" Elena shouted, diving sideways off the witness stand. The first shot shattered the wood paneling behind where she'd been sitting. The second punched through the committee table. The third sparked off the marble floor as Elena rolled behind a pillar. Chaos erupted in the committee room as senators and staff dove for cover, while Elena's training took over. She drew her service weapon and began returning fire, her shots precise and devastating despite the pandemonium around her. The first shooter went down with a bullet through his chest before he could fire again. The second managed to get off 3 more rounds before Elena's shot caught him in the head. The third tried to use fleeing civilians as cover, but Elena had a clear shot and took it without hesitation. Within 30 seconds, the shooting was over. 3 more of Harrison's associates lay dead in the committee room, and Elena stood over their bodies with her weapon still drawn. "Is everyone all right?" she called out, scanning the room for additional threats. Senator Kellerman emerged from behind the committee table, shaken but unharmed. "Marshal Cobbs, how did you know?" "Because desperate people do desperate things," Elena replied, holstering her weapon. "And Harrison's people just proved beyond any doubt that everything I've testified about is true." She turned to face the television cameras that had been broadcasting throughout the gunfight. "This is what corruption looks like when it's cornered. This is what happens when criminals infiltrate federal law enforcement agencies. And this is why the system depends on people willing to stand up and fight when others..."
6 months after the Harrison network collapsed, Elena thought she'd seen the last of organized corruption within federal law enforcement. She was wrong. The first sign of trouble came during what should have been a routine prisoner transport. Elena and her team were moving Marcus, the butcher, Kowalski, a key witness in a major organized crime prosecution, from the federal courthouse in Chicago to a secure facility in Virginia. Stated protocol, familiar route, experienced personnel. Everything went wrong at the Indiana border. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, a precision ambush that showed intimate knowledge of federal transport procedures. Elena's convoy consisted of 2 escort vehicles and an armored transport van, all following predetermined routes with radio check-ins every 15 minutes. The attackers had positioned themselves at exactly the right location to hit the convoy during a dead zone in radio coverage, using terrain features to mask their approach until the last possible moment. This wasn't random criminal opportunism. This was military-grade tactical planning executed by people with inside information. "Contact front," Elena's driver, Agent Kim Rodriguez, called out, as a heavy truck blocked the road ahead. "Multiple vehicles, armed personnel." The first RPG round struck the lead escort vehicle, flipping it sideways and blocking any retreat. The second round targeted the rear escort, ensuring the armored transport was trapped between burning wrecks. Elena keyed her radio as small arms fire began pinging off their armored hull. "Chicago Control, this is Transport 7. We are under attack. Coordinates?" "Static." The radio jamming was military-grade, sophisticated enough to block multiple frequencies simultaneously. "How many shooters?" Elena asked Rodriguez while checking her weapon. "At least 12, maybe more. They've got us boxed in pretty effectively." In the transport compartment behind them, Marcus Kowalski was shackled to a bench seat, his face pale but alert. "Marshal, these aren't ordinary road bandits. Someone paid serious money for this kind of operation." Elena knew he was right. The level of coordination, the quality of equipment, the intimate knowledge of federal procedures, this had the same hallmarks as the Harrison network, but with better funding and more sophisticated planning. "Agent Rodriguez, can you race anybody on emergency frequencies?" "Negative. They're jamming everything." Elena made a tactical decision that would have horrified her supervisors. She unlocked Kowalski's shackles. "Marcus, I'm going to give you a choice. Help us fight our way out of this ambush or die when they breach this vehicle." Kowalski rubbed his wrists where the shackles had been. "What makes you think they want me alive?" "Because if they just wanted you dead, they'd have used more RPGs. This is an extraction, not an execution." More gunfire rattled against the armored hull, followed by the distinctive sound of cutting torches being applied to the rear doors. Elena estimated maybe 5 minutes before the attackers breached our defenses. "Agent Rodriguez, status report?" "I'm hit, but functional. Shoulder wound, nothing critical." "Kowalski, still breathing, still shooting. These guys are good, but they're not special forces good." Elena risked a quick look outside the transport. The attackers had positioned themselves behind their vehicles, using the convoy's wreckage as cover while they planned their next assault. "They're going to try gas next," Elena predicted. "Standard assault doctrine when you can't breach by force." She was right. Tear gas canisters crashed through the transport's broken doors, filling the compartment with choking white smoke. Elena activated the vehicle's emergency air filtration system, but it could only do so much in an enclosed space. "Rodriguez, can you reach the driver's controls?" "Negative. Front compartment is sealed off." Elena made another tactical decision that would horrify her supervisors. She crawled forward to the driver's compartment, using a cutting torch from the emergency kit to breach the sealed partition.
The driver's compartment was a mess. Bullets had shattered the bulletproof glass, and the electronics were sparking from combat damage. But the engine was still running, and the transmission was functional. "Hold on," Elena called back to her teammates, then threw the transport into reverse and floored the accelerator. The armored vehicle crashed backward through the attacker's position, scattering them and crushing two who couldn't get out of the way fast enough. Elena spun the wheel hard left and punched through their blockade, using the armored transport's 6-inch armor plating to bulldoze through obstacles that would stop ordinary vehicles. "Where are we going?" Elena asked Rodriguez as she navigated cross-country toward the interstate. "Chicago. We need to get Kowalski to safety and figure out who's behind this attack." "Marshal," Kowalski said quietly, "I think I know who's behind this. The same people who hired me to kill federal witnesses 3 years ago." Elena's blood ran cold. "You killed federal witnesses?" "It's why I'm testifying now. Someone paid me $2 million to eliminate people under federal protection. I thought it was just business, criminal organizations cleaning up loose ends, but the money came from federal accounts." Elena pulled over at a truck stop and activated her emergency satellite phone. If Kowalski was telling the truth, then the Harrison network hadn't been eliminated. It had just gone deeper underground. "Agent Martinez, this is Elena. I need a priority conference call with FBI Director Webb and Senator Kellerman. We have a problem." The Harrison network had been the tip of the iceberg. What Elena had uncovered was a criminal conspiracy that had been operating within federal law enforcement for over a decade, with tentacles reaching into agencies she'd never suspected. And now they were coming for her again.
Elena's safe house in rural Maryland was off the books, a property she'd purchased with cash under an assumed identity, equipped with military-grade security systems and stocked with enough weapons and supplies to withstand a siege. After the ambush on the prisoner transport, she'd realized that the corruption network had resources and capabilities far beyond anything Harrison had commanded. She wasn't hiding. She was preparing for war. Marcus Kowalski sat across from her at a kitchen table covered with files, photographs, and financial records. His testimony had revealed the existence of a criminal enterprise that made the Harrison network look like amateur hour, a decades-old conspiracy that had infiltrated federal law enforcement at the highest levels. The operation started in the 1990s, Kowalski explained, pointing to bank records that showed patterns of payments dating back 20 years. Someone realized that controlling federal law enforcement was more profitable than fighting it. They started recruiting agents, judges, prosecutors, anyone who could influence the system from within. Elena studied a photograph of 12 men in expensive suits, taken at what appeared to be a private club. "Do you recognize any of these faces?" "That's Thomas Arlington, federal judge, Eastern District of Virginia. He's been fixing cases for the network for over a decade. And that's Raymond Foster, Assistant Deputy Attorney General, Criminal Division. He decides which cases get prioritized and which ones disappear." Elena had heard both names during her years in federal service. Arlington was known for his tough sentencing and law and order reputation. Foster was considered a rising star in the Justice Department, frequently mentioned as a future Attorney General. "How many federal agents are compromised?" Elena asked. Kowalski hesitated. "At least 50 that I know of, probably more. They operate in cells. Each agent only knows a few others. The people at the top maintain plausible deniability by using cutouts and intermediaries." Elena's secure satellite phone rang. Senator Kellerman's voice was tense. "Elena, we have a problem. The Justice Department is moving to discredit Kowalski's testimony. They're claiming he's fabricating evidence to reduce his sentence." "What about the physical evidence, the financial records, the communication intercepts?" "They're arguing that you obtained it illegally during unauthorized operations. Without Kowalski's testimony, they can dismiss everything as the actions of a rogue marshal." Elena looked at Kowalski, who was listening to the conversation with growing concern. "Senator, what do you need from me?" "They need proof that can't be dismissed or discredited, something that directly ties the network to specific criminal acts, with documentation that will hold up in court."
Elena hung up and walked to her kitchen window, looking out at the wooded landscape that surrounded her property. Somewhere out there, a network of corrupt federal agents was planning their next move against her. They'd already tried overwhelming force, precision ambushes, and legal maneuvering. What would they try next? Her question was answered 30 minutes later when her perimeter alarms detected movement in the tree line. Elena activated her security system's cameras and counted at least 20 figures in tactical gear approaching her house from multiple directions. "Marcus, we've got company." Kowalski moved to a window and peered through the bulletproof glass. "That's a full tactical assault team, military-grade equipment, professional movement patterns. Someone decided that subtlety isn't working." Elena's house was designed for exactly this scenario. Steel-reinforced walls, bulletproof windows, multiple firing positions, and an underground bunker stocked with enough supplies to last for weeks. But 20 professional operators with military equipment could eventually breach any defensive position. She needed to turn defense into offense. "Marcus, can you handle an assault rifle?" 20 years Special Forces, remember? Elena opened her weapons cache and began handing out equipment. "We're not staying here to be besieged. We're going out there to hunt them. You want to attack a superior force on their terms? I want to attack them on my terms. This is my property. I know every tree, every trail, every hiding spot within a square mile. They're the ones operating in unfamiliar territory." Elena activated her house's automated defense systems, motion sensors linked to floodlights, audio systems that could broadcast her voice from multiple locations, and remote-controlled weapons platforms positioned at key choke points.